Order on December the 20th at 6:04 p.m. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, and Council Members Seo, Dillon, Delorco, Kamara, Sulak, and Kraus. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Deputy Clerk. You are actually the clerk, excuse me. Terry Royal, DPW Director Searles, Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director Green, and Treasurer Bennett. There is no one else in the audience this evening, but I will state again my obligatory statement for the record that if we do have participants, if they'd sign in the back, we would appreciate that. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended or submitted, whatever your pleasure.
Moved as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Seo. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Dillon. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. There are no absences this evening, so we'll proceed to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Again, there are no citizens present this evening. I would defer to the city clerk. Clerk Royal, did we receive any questions or comments in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their statement read at this time? The record will reflect there are no citizen comments. Then we will proceed to the one and only discussion item of the evening, which is reserve fund balance. I will have some remarks, but I think it would be appropriate to yield to the city manager and to staff first. I'll share some thoughts at the conclusion of their remarks, and then we'll do a round robin of questions. This evening, I'll start to my right with Councilmember Kraus and end with Councilmember Delorco. And we'll probably have about, first round of questions will probably be about 3 or 4 minutes, and we might have time for a second as well. City Manager O'Toole, is there anything that you would like to add at this time before I yield the floor to the City Treasurer and DPW Director?
Wow, it's all about Terry tonight.
And I got the clerk on my mind.
I'd just like to express appreciation to Treasurer Bennett and Director Searles for their assistance in putting together these figures. As we've discussed previously, there are 5 unique funding sources that we believe could be repurposed or called out for allocation to resolve some of our longer-term or more immediate capital needs. And the summary of those capital needs, while we aren't necessarily prepared tonight to make exact recommendations on what policies we'd like to see you adopt and the contributions, we did make every effort to summarize and kind of make an estimation of the most conservative cases for each of those unique situations. Treasurer Bennett, if there's anything else you'd like to add, I do think that the memo that you've provided is quite comprehensive.
Very much so. Thank you, City Manager O'Toole. I guess I'll add my remarks at this time because I think there's some confusion in large part due to some information that was provided or disseminated through some local media outlets and through social media. And I just want to be clear that it's true. This organization and council more specifically have been very prudent and strategic in the way we spend and allocate money. And obviously that's reflected in our improved bond rating, an adopted fund balance policy, and also our growing fund balance and the amount of funds that we have in reserve. And while our financial position is healthy and strong, there are a lot of key priorities and a lot of things that we need to, a lot of items, that we need to invest in the ensuing years. So I just want to paint a very clear picture as to where we are today and where we're going moving forward. And so the purpose of today's discussion is to zero in on how best to use fund best dollars to meet the needs of our current residents and future residents as well. So with that, I will turn it over to the City Treasurer to discuss the memo that her and Deputy Treasurer McDonough prepared dated December the 17th.
Okay, so very quickly, because I think we've talked about this in a number of meetings, and as Colleen alluded to it, the memo just basically addresses the 4 assigned fund balances and then the excess of fund balance. The city's fund balance policy does allow for anything that exceeds the 20% of the prior year's expenses that could be considered in priority order as listed here for the pension assigned for capital projects, the OPEB trust, and to pay down debt. One other thing that I would like to mention on that note is that our fund balance, the reason we keep a fund balance as some at 20%, some may call it a rainy day fund, but we also use that money for any opportunities that may arise during the year and stuff like that. This year, I think this excess fund balance of $444,981,000, I just kind of want to remind the council that we were in receipt of $164,000 of reimbursement from our police department for COVID grants. So as we go through later and we talk about our needs, aligning some of that COVID money, those grant funds that the police department got specifically to the police department for body cameras, I think is a good offset as a nice reminder. And then the other assigned fund balances are ones that throughout the years, as monies have come back into the city of Saline, the city council, be it this council or prior councils, have assigned those monies, earmarked those monies per se, to put them aside for other considerations, which I go through in this memo and describe each one of those. The concern that I have going forward and looking at our budget is that we have always balanced our budget with ongoing revenues, with ongoing expenditures. And capital improvements and maintenance to some of our buildings and stuff like that are usually the first things that we scrap when we start looking at the budgets and the ends don't meet, which that happens every year. They never meet. The first thing we do is look at that capital projects and say, we can't do this, we can't do that. And should we have a revenue sale, and in the past we have used land sales as a great example, the most recent. If we sold a piece of property, then we would buy X amount of equipment. We've put it on a contingency list. Well, we have been pretty, at the beginning of this fiscal year, when we were working on this budget, we had some land sale contracts, which I think we only have less than a handful of lots available. So that source of revenue going forward is not going to be an option. So I think it is a good fiscal exercise for us to start thinking about how we're going to fund these these one-time costs that are inevitably going to come up. So the second part of my memo, I talk about some of those. The big one being vehicles, because it's quite expensive. We talked about that in this year's budget when we had a lot of, we considered leasing. And we will continue. I think that that's only prudent, that when we go through our budget each year, we consider all viable options, including leasing. The mechanic and Larry has went through and did a very quick overview of the existing capital improvements so that we could determine how much we would need to fund a vehicle equipment replacement reserve. And I'll let Larry kind of talk about that a little bit. And then we look at compensated absences for our employees who are, whether they leave, whether they're under a defined benefit or a defined contribution, we have compensated absences that are requirements that we owe those employees. And not all of them can we identify when they'll be leaving. So that's something that can always be an ongoing expense that we need to consider. Our pension, our unfunded liability, is a topic that we talk about annually because it is our first priority when we assign excess fund balance. But going forward in those years where we don't have fund balance excess, as things get leaner, that's going to be something that we need to focus on. And then early in our budget discussions, we talked about the police department and the body cameras. And I know that our police department has put out 2 grants for body cameras. So there would still be a match that's needed. If we get those, it would be a 50% match. It would be my recommendation that we assign some of this fund balance directly towards those body cameras, because I think that is a long-term, that could be a potential liability.
I apologize for interrupting,
No problem.
but I'm receiving some messages about people having difficulty hearing. So I'm going to ask first, Mr. Shunk, to see if he can adjust the volume, and 2, I would ask all of my colleagues, those on the dais and those participating on the floor, to make sure your microphone is close to you and that green light is illuminated when you speak. If you want to pull that just a little bit closer.
Yeah.
make
Is
it
this
feel-
better? Can
That's
you hear
better.
me?
Thank you. Yep.
Nobody ever has a problem hearing me. That's weird.
First time for everything.
Right. And then, last but not least, as you may recall, we did a facilities management, and that draft copy, maybe the final copy, has made it to our desk. I can't remember. And there's a lot of long-term cost in there. So we just kind of want to sit down tonight, and as we approach the new budget season, which we are starting, our department heads are all working on that, we want to have a conversation with this council to maybe realign and assign some of these dollar amounts for some of these broader range. So that's just a real quick overview of my memo. I think there are some things that Larry and I talked about the vehicle, so I'm going to kind of we're going to focus on that real quick and let him explain that, and then we'll go from there.
Director Schultz, if you want to comment then on bullet point 1, which is vehicle equipment policy, and then if you wanted to comment on any of the other 3 from your perspective as DPW director, some will be less relevant, of course, like 2, 3, and even certainly 4. But if you had insights on 5, facility maintenance program, and what ought to be done to upgrade and improve our existing facilities, I think that would be welcomed and appreciated. So the floor is yours.
Okay, to start with the vehicles, what the idea would be is at some point that we're going to actually be bringing in a revenue, almost like using motor pool as its own business. It's bringing in a revenue and a charge out for repair, for rental, for the employee time. We'll get better at tracking where the vehicles are being used so that we're funding it appropriately. But we get a kickstart with vehicle sales and whatever council chooses to put in. It'll give us a more consistent ability to purchase the vehicles and keep the building upkeep at DPW on par so that we're not losing ground, so that facility isn't going bad or we're holding on to vehicles too long that we should be getting rid of. And maybe a real good positive first step at right sizing the fleet. I think we may have excess vehicles, and we'll look at it more comprehensively. But I would like to get to a point for council to know that, you know, the equipment that we have is going to be replaced prior to it becoming a drain and off while there's still value. That's ultimately the goal, and we'll have the funding available to roll in the equipment, not, I guess, kind of, so to speak, punt it down the road when we really do need it.
Sure. Very good. Any additional comments, Director Schultz?
Well, I guess 1 and 5, the building and the vehicles. I think that's what I have, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bennett, anything else you'd like to add? I'd ask anyone else on staff, City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, or Assistant City Manager Green. Is there anything you'd like to add at this time? The record will reflect there are no comments. I would throw out, and actually this is not a Brian Marl original idea, it was articulated by the City Manager, but on the issue of vehicles, I am going to be an advocate for trying to sell the 2, I think they're either 2018 or 2019 white Ford Focuses. They're used here by staff at City Hall. It would be a very advantageous time to try to unload those. They have low miles. They're in pretty good shape. I think they should be replaced by 2 cars, and my hunch would be maybe 1 compact and 1 midsize. But I think that should be something that we ought to consider and move forward on either in the first or second quarter of 2022. Okay, thank you. All right, we will open it up for questions for either the City Manager, DPW Director, or more importantly, the City Treasurer. And I will begin with Councilmember Kraus. I'll try to keep you to about 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So this is a lot of work, so thank you for doing this. Quick question on, if I do the math right on the debit credit side, the funds that we have to use are 3.4 million and change, the first things that you've listed, number 1 through 5. If I do the 1 through 5 on the other side, they both equal about 3.4 million. I just want to make sure I'm conceptualizing that right.
If you're, and I'm not exactly sure under item number 2, which number,
Yeah, fair.
what dollar amount you're looking
So
at.
on number 2, I went ahead with the whole one, assuming everybody retires, just so I can get, okay.
Yeah.
And then on the last one, I used the 608 plus the 340 plus the 350 on number 5.
So, yeah.
Okay, all right. So
I'm going to trust you use the calculator.
I did. Okay, so can we, on number 5 then, facility maintenance, if the 1-year capital is 608, an additional 340 and 350 for years 2 and 3, can we encumber those out years 2 and 3 right now? Is that allowed to be done? The 340, an additional 340 and 350 are estimated in years 2 and 3. Can-
We certainly could. I don't think with those dollar amounts, we necessarily need to, because they could be absorbed by the general fund theoretically within those years, especially if we're taking out vehicle purchases from the general fund. That's going to free up a lot of capital year over year.
Okay, so the 608 would be for this year, the 1-year capital needs.
That would be for first year capital needs. So I'll be perfectly frank. I don't feel we're at a place where staff is ready to recommend what our year 1 allocation would be set aside for that. Worst case scenario, highest case scenario, I would go is the full year 1 cost of 608.
Okay,
But we still are having conversations with the contractors who have prepared that study to identify, one, whether we agree with all of those assumptions or if there's more information that's needed, and two, how we want to spread those costs out over time.
I think what I'm getting at is these are great recommendations, but what if there's another idea floating around out there that hasn't yet been addressed? So we will have some surplus to talk about, assuming 1 through 4 and then part of 5 are good to go. I'm worried about ideas that are floating around out there that are legitimate but aren't addressed in here.
Absolutely, and
Okay.
I agree with you completely. I don't think that it's staff's recommendation that we expend all of those dollars simply because we have them.
Okay.
There are still very good ideas out there, and to your point on compensated absences, I don't think that it's necessary for us to set aside the full 1.3 million, because the likelihood
Right.
of having to pay out all compensated absences at one time is astronomically low.
And
We-
there'd be a lot of other expenses.
There'd be
We-
some other crazy
We'd have bigger problems on our hands. I'm just trying to think of like what else. I haven't heard all the ideas yet, and I'm not prepared to have a consensus on what we're all doing with this yet because there's other ideas. So I want to make sure that we're not,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, and
Okay.
I think staff shares my opinion on this. That's why we wanted to have this second meeting. We wanted to outline real numbers for you guys. These are, again, conservative case scenarios, but there will be additional funding opportunities if there are other ideas out there.
and we will have a chance to share those at some point, correct?
If you have ideas now,
Did I use up my 5 minutes,
No,
Mayor?
actually, no, not at all. What I was going
Okay.
to say, Councilmember Kraus, and this is for your benefit and my other 6 colleagues, or my other 5 colleagues as well, is in addition to your questions, I think it would be beneficial for the chair and for staff, if you had additional ideas on how we could spend fund balance dollars, we would love to hear those now or certainly in the future.
Okay.
And conversely, if you are able to offer some insight as to the 5 enumerated suggestions, in terms of what would be your priority, how you feel about them, and if there are specific dollar amounts that you have in mind, we would welcome that as well.
Okay, thank you. So I want to make a bid for the fire department, and I understand they work differently. I understand there's a board. There's a few things. I happened to visit the other day. I'd never been over there. I just wanted to say hi and get to know some people. I have a friend who works there. I wanted to say hi. They have a ceiling falling in. And so I don't know, I understand how the board works, but it doesn't preclude us, to my knowledge, from offering them a gift that doesn't have to be distributed amongst the other percentages from the others. They also, there was one other item, they use a standard house washing machine right now. The percentage of cancer for firefighters, for the armpits and pelvis area, I'm not sure what the cancer is called, is extremely high. There is an industry standard washing machine that washes their clothes, their turnout gear, to decrease the chances that they will get that cancer. It is about $30,000. And I was shocked that they didn't have one. It's a simple fix. It's one thing. So that's been floating around in my brain. I know there's a board, but I don't want to that's a lot of money we have, and if there's a big surplus, making sure that our firemen are protected from something simple would be something I'd want to keep on the radar.
I can comment to that if you'd like. I appreciate those remarks, Councilmember Kraus, and as you know, because I expressed this in writing in my weekly communique on Friday, I had lunch with the fire chief, Chief Spurley, on Wednesday, and we discussed a number of needs and priorities. I've also asked him to develop with a complement, or with a narrative that complements the requests and suggestions, a 5-year strategic plan, which will be submitted to the fire board and ultimately the community, probably, definitely in the first quarter of 2022. From our preliminary discussions, it sounds like there are a number of needs and that the budget for the Saline Fire Department will grow in the ensuing year. So there's certainly nothing that would prohibit the city of Saline from contributing more or earmarking dollars for specific projects or initiatives within the fire department. I guess I would ask at this point is, while those are very important and good suggestions, let's kind of put those on the back burner at least for another month until the fire department's budget committee develops a first draft of the budget, which will be completed by the end of January, and then submitted to the fire board for discussion.
That's fine. Does that preclude them from being considered for the surplus, though? I mean,
Definitely not.
Okay, yep. I just wanted to keep that on the radar for them. That's all. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Kraus?
Not at this time.
Very good. Then Councilmember Kamara-Sulak, you have 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. I read through the changes.
Kevin, please make sure that microphone is close to you. Sorry to interrupt.
I read through the changes, so it answered some of my questions, so I appreciate that. So for the assigned legislative changes, was that amount expected? Is that what we were expecting, and is there any reason that that would change?
So the assigned legislative changes is an amount that we have now. It's not something we're projecting. That is money that we currently have, and that is money that it was in excess of what we had budgeted for. That's why we earmarked it.
Okay, so are we doing the same thing for next year, or the next fiscal year?
Unless directed otherwise, that's kind of what we want to talk about in this meeting. If we get excess personal property right now, we're following these guidelines until decided differently.
Okay, very good. And then, let's see. So for the compensated absences, I understand that that 1.331595 would be what we would owe if that were to be paid out today. So is the 2.6 million that had come out, I don't know how many months ago,
That number was corrected back in March, and I know that when I reprinted the memo earlier, but that memo was a formula error. That 2.6 is not an accurate number. This
Okay.
1.3 is with everybody.
Okay, so that's been double-checked so that there's
Yep,
no other error? Okay.
yep,
I feel much more comfortable with that number than the
yeah,
2.6.
yeah. And when I resubmitted that memo, I did not change that, that dollar amount, so that's my bad. I apologize for that. But the 1.3 is the accurate number. It's been checked by Colleen and myself and the formula.
Okay, very good. I'm glad to hear
I
that.
wish we could all just totally forget that 2.6, because it haunts me, okay?
I'm going to work on forgetting it now.
Thank you.
So for the facilities maintenance program, I understand how that's laid out. Is there any way we could see the facility study, that condition assessment study?
Absolutely, yeah, I can send the draft copy that we have now to council for review.
It was sent out.
I-
Didn't
did
you
I
send it out, Mike?
include it?
Mike sent it out.
Mike sent it, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Last week.
Yeah, with one of the, I thought it was with Colleen's communique.
Well, I can resend it if you haven't received it.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, look, it might have been with a bunch of other documents that were included there. And I must reiterate that I want to be cautious with how we spend the money and not to spend all of it just because we have it. And I echo Councilwoman Councilwoman Kraus's thoughts on the fire department and looking at it, any other ideas that may come forward. And I'm glad to hear that we can look at those in the future, and that this isn't nailing everything down, because this is quite a bit to take in of what we have and where we're planning on putting it, and making sure that it makes sense.
Well, and one thing that I would just like to add is our fund balance policy, if we assign a fund balance, that has to be done by the board. So as you can see, we have these four assignments that the board at their highest authority can change that at any time too. So by no means am I recommending that we take, I mean, yes, they add up the same, but it's not my recommendation that we take everything and tie them into here. But I do think that we need to, I think, every year, these assignments need to be evaluated and make sure that they're being set aside for the, the needs that we're facing, and be it, something, we can't possibly, after 36 years, we can't possibly think of everything that we're gonna need money for. This is just to kind of align some of these that we do know.
Okay, very good. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kamara Sulak. Councilmember Seal, I know you had some questions earlier, but the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
I did. Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you, staff, for answering those questions as promptly as you did. I went through an exercise, sounds like much like you did, Ms. Kraus. I added up the liabilities and added up the resources and compared the two. However, the one difference I did make was under the number 2, the compensated absences. I only took out the $100,000 that you had suggested in your memo, which I thought was reasonable. After years and years of doing budgeting, it's kind of an educated guess about how these things are going to occur, but I think that sounded reasonable. So adding up the resources and the debits, I come up with an excess of like $742,000 or what you'd recommended. To me, that seemed reasonable. It covers years 2 and 3 of the maintenance costs if there are no other revenues that come in, but we know that there will be. I know we've got a couple of offers right now on Lot 20A, and I don't see that money in here anywhere. So that's still money that's yet to be added to whatever it is that we have to spend in the future. So I'm very much in support of what you recommend in your memo, Mickey Joe, for expenditures, and I think they all sound reasonable to me. It would still leave us some money in the bank to cover those unforeseen things. It would cover the pre-funding, beginning to pre-fund for the vehicles for the future and so on. And as the last statement, I will say that insofar as the pension payment, I'm going to abstain and remain on the fence because of my obvious conflict of interest being a beneficiary of that fund myself.
Very good. Yep.
So, thank you, Your Honor.
Your abstention regarding additional payments to MERS is noted for the record, Mr. Seal. Thank you for that. Councilmember Dillon, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I do have a couple questions. So on the vehicle equipment policy, does that current plan take in for growth of the city? Because obviously as we grow, we'll require additional equipment.
To be blunt, we have more equipment than we have bodies, and I don't think we're looking at growing that rate to put a driver in every piece of equipment. I think we're actually going to be looking at shrinking our fleet, at least from DPW.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. So then on the compensated absences on number 2, the 1.3 number, do we have an estimate as to what that would be? Obviously, if it's not a one-time payout, what the future cost would be with inflation, or is that a stagnant number?
It is not a stagnant number. It's hard to tell it would be hard to calculate inflation because of employees that are coming and going and when they leave and when they're gonna take time off and when they, I mean, we know what they can accrue, but we have no idea of what they would take off in the year. Because this dollar amount represents their banks today, assuming they're never gonna take another day off. So it would be very difficult to project what that is. Audit purposes, we book the actual at year end, which would be a number similar to this.
Okay. And what is our current policy as to payouts? Is it a lump sum payout? Is it over periods of time? Do we have the discretion with that?
Policy for majority of the employees under union contract, and I mean for everybody, when you separate with the city of Saline, you get your payouts. Depending on your level, you may or may not get your sick leave or, those banks, but it is paid out upon the time you leave because required by fair labor standards, they can request a W-2 as soon as they walk out the door. So that would be an obligation that we would pay upon separation.
Okay, so that's good to know. And then, City Manager mentioned with the general fund that we're going to be moving line items from that into other funding sources, basically. So what do you envision happening with those general fund line items? Like those dollars that we would now have in excess theoretically?
Well,
Or are you saying, I'm sorry, just so I'm clear, or are you saying with the line item goes the money?
so for example, under the Public Works Department now, we won't have individual line item purchases for equipment. We will have an annual contribution to the vehicle equipment replacing line item policy. Whether that is equal to or less than what we would have spent in any given year on actual equipment, I can't definitively say for the next fiscal year, but if we're smoothing, like we're intending to do, it should be less of an impact each fiscal year. So if there are funds in excess because that budget line item has decreased over time, or that combination of budget line items has decreased over time, it simply just leaves us with more general fund dollars and potentially more excess fund balance at the end of the year to allocate.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out how that was working, so I appreciate that. And then my only other question, sorry. So on number 2 of the assigned legislative changes, the 1.3 there, I think we were talking about this at a last meeting. Is there an opportunity or to use any of those dollars? Because LDFA has a shortfall, correct? Should that money be, because it was personal property, and should that be going that way? I thought we talked about that at our last meeting.
I think we talked about LDFA, which would be number 3, Sauk Trail. But Sauk Trail, that repayment was completely back from the LDFA number 2, which is by no means a shortfall. And they have, that district is, we have went through to the length that we're going to be able to capture those taxes and planned on all of the CIP projects and allocated all those funds. And we have actually returned some of the LDFA number 2 fund balance back to all of the units because we've collected and it meets our needs. So the only thing that I would say there is now you're taking LDFA 2 funds, because this is strictly paid back from LDFA 2 if you wanted to cover the shortfall of LDFA 1, which is a different district.
Right. Okay.
Well,
I'm not sure
if I
I
may
under-
chime in on this.
Go ahead.
Part of my idea would be is to take those funds that we've reserved as legislative, we call them assigned legislative changes, which were directly related to personal property, because some of the funds that would have actually been collected by us in terms of personal properties would have been directly deposited into those individual LDFAs.
LDFA and TIFAs get their own personal property reimbursement that does not come into the general fund. So all 3 of the TIFA and the both LDFAs, I do a separate calculation, and that personal property replacement comes into them and is dedicated solely to them. So this legislative assignment here, that is all the city portion.
So we're still calculating the amount that's contributed to the LDFAs based on the
Yes.
original property, personal property that was assigned to that.
Same as we do for the city. It's required by the state for all three of those districts.
So there was no change in terms of how the city is allocating personal property to us, or the state.
There is a change, but this change is the same for the city as it is for both of the LDFAs. So what would have been captured by those districts, let's just call them the capture districts, we're following the same new legislation for those districts, and that money is going directly to those districts. So their personal property loss is being reimbursed at the same calculation that the city is, but I have to use those calculations based on their 2013 taxable values minus what we have this year. The difference is calculated and goes directly to them. This is strictly the city's portion of personal property loss. The TIFAs and the capture districts are reimbursed individually.
Right, but because we weren't allowed to add in any new personal property, and because it was fixed at 2013, there is a continual potential of lost revenue to those LDFAs that is made up by this legislative assigned balance that we get from the state.
They're going into their, they calculate that. That's what we're doing for them as well. So we take this year's minus the 2013, and we calculate it for the TIFA and both of the LDFAs. They're separate reports, and we say this is what their loss is, and they send me a check to those districts, and those go into those district funds.
Yeah,
So
so
there-
those districts are already being made whole by the same
The
process.
same process is going directly to those districts.
But there isn't how do you account for any new personal property, anything that was, they're not reporting on it anymore, so isn't it a fixed figure based on 2013?
The difference between, well, there's also, the state has a formula that through the ESA, that they have to, the new business, and I'm gonna tell you, this is not my area of expertise, but they have to do a self-reporting tax, and then that's where this excess stuff is coming from for all those districts. That's how come we have this excess, is when they self-report it, it's higher than what it comes in of our reporting.
This is a really good discussion. Hank, why don't you
Yeah,
hold
yeah,
that
that's
thought,
fine.
Mr. Gilbert?
Yeah, why don't we-
I want to jump back to
we'll let that
Councilmember
go for
Dillon.
another-
She's got 2 more minutes, and then we'll jump to Mayor
Yep.
Pro Tem Gearboff.
So I'm going to end sort of with, I just want to know how this document correlates with our strategic plan, and how our strategic plan can fit into these buckets, to make sure that what we want, we've got funding sources for and such. So that's what I'm going to, that's where I'm going to sort of leave it. I do think, for me personally, facility maintenance needs to be an absolute priority. The vehicle equipment policy, I think, needs to be established so that we can have a better source for vehicles and have a normal rotation of our vehicles going through. The compensated absences, I think that we definitely, it's a liability that we're going to have to acknowledge at some point, so we do need to start setting a percentage of dollars each year for that. Pensions, I'd like to see money in maybe an unassigned that's holding for them. Right now at a 69% funded rate versus the state's 60% recommendation. We're a little ahead of the curve. Obviously, if there's a bump in the market, that could change. But I don't want to be over-contributing when we know we have other expenses on the table right now. And the body cameras, that's a one-time cost. And I think we just need to look at it as a one-time cost and where it can be allocated into a budget. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gearboff, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. When I look at this, one of the things that my concern is making sure that we do address the issues that would have been postponed for a considerable amount of time. The facility maintenance program is a significant aspect that needs to be addressed. It hasn't. We've got failed ceilings in buildings throughout the city, or roofs and some other things that should never have happened. under our last watch, and I think now that we've got the funds, those need to be addressed at this point in time. What I would like to understand a little bit, though, is since we're freeing up some of the funds by creating this equipment reserve and hoping that we'd have a contribution directly going into it, some of these funds that we've held on to could potentially be used for either pilot programs or some staffing needs. And I'm not sure how you're going to be addressing those, and that may be coming forward because we are adding positions, which making sure that, we are adding positions, so we're trying to make sure that going forward, are they out of recurring funds or are we using them out of one-time only monies? And some of these funds could help with that, but then, of course, you've always got the issue of 2 or 3 years down the road, we've burned those off and don't have replacement funding. That could be a concern. So I'm hoping that we've accounted for that in terms of somehow designating that as a type of what we used to call bridging funding that bridges us up between what's actually going to come in and what actually we anticipate. The other piece would be, I would like to see us undesignate the number 4 that called unfunded liabilities. Despite how that's identified, the intent of that was to reduce the $100,000 because of the concern that we had with the rec center and everything, and that funding was not to be set aside as much as it was to be considered a reduction in the actual contribution that we did to MERS.
Dean, I'm sorry. Hold that microphone a little bit closer. I'm having trouble hearing you. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, we need to fix these mics if I've got to have this in my mouth, so I don't appreciate this at this point. So considering also from the perspective of, I would like to see some type of pilot program where we have issues where we could identify some of the funding. I mean, an example of being the meters where we know it's going to save us $30,000 in the DPW or some of those aspects that aren't necessarily rebuild. We could contribute that by making sure something happens and looking at that. Not everything has to be necessarily a recapture in the utilities itself, but it may be recapture of time and other needs. So I'd like to consider that as a possibility for some of these funds to be set aside. We had this at one point in time, but never was really utilized. I think we have some new staff that have some new ideas that should be funded that way. I do understand the issue with contributing more to the fire, but I want to make sure that's clarified. They are a taxing unit for which all that funding should be adequately applied to all the townships, because as a city, we already are subsidizing it to some degree, and we need to consider making sure that those funds are adequately accounted for. Even though we may have some extra money, I think there's some things that which we can do in the city that benefit our citizens that have contributed to that, not necessarily the townships. Police body cameras, definitely, I want to see that move forward at this point. That's not a significant amount, but it is something that I think will justify itself by making sure that our safety people are not only backing them up, but also with the citizenry. And then lastly, for me, some of these other items are just considered things that we normally have done. I mean, the defined benefit plan, we used to be at about 80%. That was many years ago. Now that we're at 69.6, perhaps maybe being a little more aggressive in that is reasonable. It just seems to be more of a issue with relating what are they using as the parameters for determining the return. And since that went up, that's the reason why that kind of went down. And then also, I agree with the city manager in terms of compensated absences. There should be a significant dollar amount at which would be much less than this, but reasonable in terms of the same way we approach the pension liability. It may not be fully funded, but we're not going to commit everything to it because we don't actually know what the actual future outcome is going to be. And with that, I think that's all my understanding. Oh, the other thing, I would like to see a reserve for storm sewer funds. If we get the opportunity to match things that are coming from the state or the infrastructure funding, we need to have funds to set aside, and those are dollars that just are not going to come from anywhere else. And if we've got $1.3 million in assigned legislative changes, those funds should be used to help address the actual infrastructure that cannot be paid through fees.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember DeLorco, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh covered a lot of things I had thought about, and a lot of the questions have been answered. One thing I was wondering about with the equipment revolving fund, Mickey Jo, I assume you have ranked these things as most important to least important in your estimation of how you feel this should be thought about and allocated?
Are you talking about the,
1 to
through
5, the categories, yeah.
No, sir, those aren't ranked
Okay.
on my, these are just as they've come up and that's just how they've kind of made the list. I have not ranked them.
Okay, so establishing the equipment revolving fund seems to be a new way forward and an important way forward. And I like to think about this in ways of establishing this fund, because this is the first time we're going down this path. Is it possible to just designate all future real estate sales as a way to seed money this fund, to build up a balance, to give us something to work with as we're moving in this direction?
The board has that authority, yes.
Okay. And then, is it exclusively only able to be used for vehicle purchases, or can we offset facility upgrades, for example, at the DPW, with the equipment revolving fund?
So the way that we would write this policy, I think we would restrict it completely. That's why I would like to have policies written for these individually, so that they're clearly designated in the policy that this is motor pool equipment that is going to be, that is going to be used and maintained by our Department of Public Works. I think the facilities management maintenance thing should be a totally separate policy, so
Okay.
that it's very clear what those funds are set aside for. As I mentioned, equipment's always the first thing that gets cut every budget because it's a one-time cost and we don't have the one-time funds for it.
Right.
So that's why I think it's important that we have strict policies on this, which I have drafted for the vehicle.
Yeah, it seems if we're 26% unfunded liability, or sorry, surplus, and we are required to maintain 20, is that the number I understand?
Correct.
So if we take on establishing an equipment revolving fund and we designate a certain portion of unfunded balance to go towards funding that, we're still able to maintain that 20%. I don't know what the number you're thinking of per year we would need to contribute to the equipment revolving fund.
So I'm not sure I understand the exact question. Our policy for fund balance states that anything in excess of 20%, the council will consider assigning it. And that is prioritized order, as I mentioned in my memo, as stated in the policy, where MERS and OPEB would be your first, and
Right.
then liabilities would be your third.
Yeah,
As far as this vehicle equipment, the number that we're looking at is taking, and after, kind of talking over after city manager had some comments about this list, and the three of us were able to actually communicate with our schedules. The idea would be to fund this for the first year, plus fund this with some seed money for the first year, and then take the money that would be in the general fund and start that for the next year. So what the recommendation of $690,000, as brought to our attention by the city manager, included a Vector purchase, which wouldn't be coming out of the general fund.
right.
So
That
that
would
is-
eat up the whole balance pretty much.
Right. So that number, taking that Vector out and putting that Vector where it would be closer to like 250,000 to get this started for the first fiscal year. And then leaving other money, possibly maybe taking that other half and putting it towards the maintenance fund or whatever council, chooses. And
Yeah.
it could be something that we determine, we annually have a meeting and discuss these.
Okay, and that's not accounting for the real estate sales?
That is not accounting for the real estate sales, because I would like to remind you that in October, I wrote a memo and said, we have 3 signed
Right.
leases, and we don't have them anymore.
Right, you can't
And-
count on it.
So I have never budgeted for real estate sales until the money has been received, and then we do an amended budget and put it in there, because it's just too many uncertainties.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So I think it's important for the council to think about assigning a percentage to each of the 5 categories in terms of what we think would be the most urgent needs as we look at offsetting unfunded liabilities. And obviously, the compensated absences has been well discussed. We don't need to fund it all 100% all up at once, but we should contribute a significant portion there. And the pension, obviously, those things are, if we have extra funds to contribute to offsetting those liabilities, we should be doing that. With respect to the facility maintenance program, I did have a chance to have a cursory look at the report that was sent out for the condition assessment study. And I sent an email to Assistant City Manager Mike Green about this. I had a brief concern that the firehouse was not included in the condition assessment study, and that's something we might want to urge the board to look at. If we're going to, be approaching the fire chief for amending the budget and looking at how we're going to plan that out for the future, we should have some idea of what state the building is in as part of that condition assessment study. And I assume the fire board would have to take their own initiative to do that. And I agree with addressing deficiencies and any FTEs that would help staffing needs. And I thought that was a good point about reserves for storm sewer funds. And with respect to the personal property tax and the legislative changes, I thought I understood that we were projecting a much more dire situation than what actually occurred with that. And that's how we have those surplus funds.
For the assigned legislative changes, exactly.
Yeah, okay. So are there other legislative changes that in the works that the legislature that we're anticipating could produce a windfall deficit for us?
Not to my knowledge, but I'm gonna not, I haven't had anything come across my desk.
I mean, there was recent legislation that the state considered, obviously, providing, I don't know if it's going to be a rebate or a tax incentive to small businesses, which may have an impact on our local capture.
Okay.
I think I would anticipate, based on what we receive annually from the PPT reimbursement, it would not be in excess of that. But if it ever got to a point where it was, we should maintain some balance in that legislative changes line item for that purpose.
Okay, right. And just to close, I would agree that we don't want to spend all this money down. We need certain of it set aside for unexpected events and occurrences. But yeah, that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. DeLarco. Well, the downside of going last is sometimes you got to speak quickly in order to adjourn this meeting and convene the next. So I'll try to exercise some brevity here. I do strongly support moving forward with the implementation of a reserve policy reference our fleet of vehicles. I think that ought to be done sometime in the first quarter of 2022. Along with other colleagues, I know several spoke up on this. Item 5, facility maintenance program. That's something that I planned on messaging on in my January State of the City address. That absolutely must be done. We've got some great buildings in our inventory. I think of this facility first and foremost, but it's nearing 20 years of age, and it needs an additional infusion of cash to maintain it and to make the necessary upgrades. I have always been, let me jump now to item 3. I have always been, since my tenure as mayor began in 2013, a strong advocate of making additional payments to MERS. I would like to see our funding percentage be in excess of 70%. So I don't know that a $100,000 additional commitment would be necessary, but I would like to make some contribution in the not too distant future, some additional contribution, excuse me. In terms of items that are not enumerated in the memo dated December the 17th, much like Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, I'd like to see something set up in reference to storm sewer infrastructure. As I messaged to City Council on Friday, that was a main topic of conversation between myself, City Manager O'Toole, and Senator Irwin when he visited us on Friday. Senator Irwin says that while it is not a component of the current infrastructure bill that I think just got voted out of the state Senate, he hopes that it will be. The legislature's record on infrastructure is pretty abysmal, and I think that's being generous. And they have never stepped up to the plate and exercised leadership or provided adequate funding to municipalities to deal with stormwater infrastructure. And as a result, we saw a number of serious issues, including flooded expressways and basements throughout Metro Detroit this past season. What we know is that these weather events are going to become more routine. 100-year rains are now 10-year rains. We learned that at a recent SEMCOG conference. And so we need to start investing robustly in stormwater infrastructure. And that's actually another issue that I'll be messaging on in my January State of the City address. And I'm also working with Senator Irwin's office because I think this council ought to go on record and pass a resolution sometime in early 2022, encouraging the legislature to step up to the plate and to develop a recurring system in which projects would be funded. And then last, and I don't care if it's with reserve or excess fund balance dollars, or whether we use COVID relief money. But as I mentioned in the past, I would like to reestablish the Economic Development Trust Fund. I think that's another tool we need in our belt to help attract and retain businesses and create new jobs and amenities and services in the Saline community. So that's something that I would strongly support, and I think we could get that off the ground with a relatively small nominal dollar amount. That's all I have to share at this time, and that brings us to 6:59. Are there any pressing issues that anyone would like to express or articulate before we adjourn and reconvene into our regular session? But before I jump to you, Mr. Gearbaugh, City Manager O'Toole, anything you'd like to add?
I would just echo, I thought Councilmember Delacroix's idea was great. If council could return to me with maybe their prioritization list for what you've seen here today, plus the additional ideas that you've shared with me, it would help us to start presenting actual policies.
And when would be the deadline? When would you like that?
If we could have it by the end of this calendar year so we can start incorporating policies in our first 2 meetings in January, I think that would be helpful.
That's pretty clear, and that gives folks ample time. So please provide your thoughts in writing to the city manager no later than the end of next week. Mr. Gearbaugh, before we conclude, was there one additional item you wanted to bring forward?
Just one other thing that we talked about is I'd like to consider, as we talk pilot programs, the potential of a grants officer or a grants individual that we could use as a pilot.
Very good. If there's nothing else, then the chair would be happy to
Brian?
entertain a motion to
Brian?
adjourn. I'm sorry.
Councilmember.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to, the other thing that I would like to mention, Mr. Gearbaugh touched upon this, that I think is very important for us, is to allocate dollars into a fund that can set for grant matching. There are a lot of grants out there. A lot of times we don't qualify for them because we don't have the matching funds available at the time of the grant. And I think having an established fund for that would give us a lot of leverage in getting grants.
Thank you for that. Okay, we got to go, folks. So I need a motion now to adjourn at 7:01 p.m.
So moved.
Moved by Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Dillon. All those in favor of adjourning at 7:01 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. You've got 2 minutes, and then we'll reconvene into regular session. I'd like to call the Saline City Council meeting to order. If you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, Council Members Seo, Dillon, Delorco, Kamara Sulak, and Kraus. From city staff, we have City Manager O'Toole, Clerk Royal, Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director Green. I don't believe Parks and Rec Director Scruggs will be with us tonight. DPW Director Searles is here, Police Chief Hart, City Treasurer Bennett, and I believe City Engineer Humphreys as well. The rest of you who are in the audience, we welcome you. There are agendas on the back table. We would encourage you to sign in. There's also listening devices in the rear if you require them. At this time, the chair would be happy to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted unless there are amendments.
Move to submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Seo. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kraus. All those in favor of approving the agenda as submitted signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. There are no absences, so we'll proceed to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any individuals who wish to speak on an agenda item? Please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes.
What are your mask protocols for speakers?
It is totally your preference. If you'd like to keep it on, keep it on. If you prefer it off, you may take it off for the 3 minutes.
I think I'm more than 10 feet away. So my name is Michael McVeigh. I'm a resident of Saline and a trustee for the Saline Area Schools Board of Education. And I also teach remotely for Eastern Michigan University. And from my home office, I have a good view of the pedestrian crossing from Wildwood Trail over Woodland Drive East. My heart stops a little every time I see flashing emergency lights outside my window because I know that is the area where young children cross on their way to and from school each day. I'd like to amplify the memorandum from Chief Hart in the new business section on your agenda this evening. I'd also like to state that it's my honor to stand beside the Wildwood parents that first brought this crosswalk issue to the attention of City Council, City of Saline, as well as the Saline Area Schools Administration. I wish to speak in favor of 3 things: of establishing a school zone during the specified times as one of 3 potential remedies for slowing traffic and reducing the chances of an accident. The second potential remedy is to manage the speed of traffic along that stretch at those times is a traffic control device. And it's my hope that you'll find the appropriate funds to properly enhance crosswalk signage there with such a device. And finally, once temperatures warm up, I'd like to see the city prioritize the repainting of that existing crosswalk and keep the maintenance of all school crossings as one of your highest priorities going forward. It's quite faded right now. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, School Board Member McVeigh. We appreciate your attendance and your comments this evening. Are there additional citizen comments on agenda items? Please.
Good evening. My name is Justin Teams. I'm a resident in the Wildwood sub, and my kids cross at that same crosswalk every day. I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to hear our concerns. I've been very vocal on the issue with a whole lot of email. Thanks to the police department for taking the time to be very vocal in public with enforcement of the existing traffic laws. And I know myself, my wife, and many of my friends and neighbors in the Wildwood sub that are now, that's now a walking district, are really looking forward to, hopefully you adopt this measure, and really appreciate you taking it under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teams. We appreciate your comments. Appreciate your attendance tonight and your advocacy. Additional citizen comments? School Board Member Estep?
Hello, I'm Susan Eastep, also a board trustee of Saline Area Schools, although I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. And I'm also a parent of 3 children in the school district, and I travel Woodland Drive for pickup and drop-off, and know that one of our parents has contacted the Saline Area Schools and has been in communication with the city of Saline, and I appreciate the steps that you are have taken to protect our children in the district. I do, I know that this is definitely a priority. And in addition to, reducing the speed limit, I also believe that there should be flashing lights to notify people, coming upon the crosswalk. I've witnessed children going out and quickly running back because they realize a vehicle is coming straight at them, and that scares me. And so I've noticed more police presence in that area over the past, I guess, few weeks. And I think that's helpful, but I still think that we need crosswalks, crossing guards, and hope that also, while this project is still being researched, that's something that we can get put in place ASAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate your remarks, your advocacy, your time this evening. Any additional comments from those in the audience this evening? Then I would defer to the city clerk. Were there any comments provided in writing in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual or individuals wish their comments to be read at this time? No, sir. Very good. Then we'll proceed to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Let me defer to Councilmember Dillon. I believe you wanted to remove item 21-244, which would come back for review and approval at our subsequent meeting.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Okay.
It is.
So will you move then to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Correct.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kraus. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move now to public hearing. This is agenda item 21-245, special land use for 1329 Woodland Drive. This is a series of 4 motions. We'll start with we'll hear comments from Mr. Green and from Councilmember Gearbaugh, who's the liaison to the Planning Commission during the third motion. Excuse me, there's 3 motions here, not 4, as well as the applicant if he wishes to speak. So at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to open the public hearing at 7:12, affording the public an opportunity to speak to this issue if they so choose.
So moved.
Moved by Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Dillon. All those in favor of opening the public hearing at 7:12 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This public hearing is now open. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Clerk Royal, did we receive any communiques in advance of tonight's meeting? No, sir. Okay, one last opportunity. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this matter?
Move to close.
Moved by Gearbaugh to close, and that was seconded by Seal. All those in favor of closing the public hearing at 7:13 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. This public hearing is now closed. The final motion will be a motion to acknowledge the memo dated December 15, 2021 from Assistant City Manager Green and to approve or not to approve Planning Commission recommendation to approve with conditions the application of Todd Gensheimer of JP Commercial Real Estate for special land use for sections 4.0415 for outdoor sports facility on I-2 district located at 1328 Woodland Drive, East Saline, Michigan 48176, parcel number 18-12-20-430-015 with the following conditions. 1, that the applicant receive final site plan approval from the Planning Commission. 2, that the applicant must stay compatible with the use as defined in the JP Commercial letter stamped received December 1st, 2021.
To acknowledge and approve.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by CO, seconded by Kamara Sulak. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Green, do you care to comment first?
Yep, thanks, sir. So this one is pretty straightforward. JP Commercial would like to build an indoor sports facility about 12,000 square feet, and it would be home to Michigan Sports Academy. Michigan Sports Academy is currently a partner in our industrial park, so they do have a current special land use approval for their current site. Now they're just looking to move that to this new location. This project has gone through Planning Commission already, as noted in the motion. They have received their preliminary site plan approval, and they have received approval for the special land use via Planning Commission, which is why it's here before you guys with the recommendation. So we're here to answer any questions you may have, and Todd is also here to answer any additional questions specifically for the project.
Very good. Hang tight, Mr. Green. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh is the council liaison to the Planning Commission. Do you could add any additional insights at this time?
Not a lot. The reason that the applicant letter was identified as a condition was to clarify that the use, should it change or should it expand beyond what it currently is, would have to be readdressed. We've had concerns in the industrial park where some of the sports facilities have gone into tournaments and become an issue with parking and so forth at this point. The other issue that was raised was there was some understanding or concern about converting our industrial park land into other uses besides industrial, but considering that some of these lots are difficult to sell, and especially this one has been off and on a number of times because of the cost to develop it and so forth, this seems an adequate approach, and even next door to it is another sports facility. The only other concern would be is if granting the special use violates any of our tenants or any of the issues in terms of how we develop some of those parks, but at this point in time, those have all expired. And really, the only one that had one is Salt Trail, and those are no longer effective at this point. So this seems like a reasonable way to move forward. And the building, because of the way the design is, could be easily converted into other industrial use or something of that nature because it's more of a warehouse-style general building instead of something that's really customized at this point. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Gensheimer, we welcome you this evening. We appreciate your attendance. Is there anything that you'd like to add for the record? And then you may want to hang tight at the podium because there may be some questions that are best addressed by you.
Mr. Mayor, I have no prepared remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Well, hang tight. Are there questions for our Assistant City Manager, the applicant, or for our Planning Commission liaison? Councilmember Dillon.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask in the plan, the recommendations of Carlisle Wortman, were those acknowledged and gone through planning so that they've met all of the requirements and recommendations?
Yeah, I can touch on that, Dean. Yes, the majority of their comments have been addressed. The majority of Carlisle Wortman's comments related specifically to the site plan, which Planning Commission oversees.
Right.
So Planning Commission's site plan approval was essentially conditional approval with numbers, I think, 6 through 12, which were all just essentially expanding details that will be addressed when the final site plan comes through. Yeah, none of their conditions relate to the special land use.
And I'm sorry, but I can't tell from the drawing. Will there be a sidewalk at this property?
There already is one.
There is one already?
There's already an existing sidewalk on the frontage of this property.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any additional questions for the applicant, our Planning Commission liaison, or staff? The record will reflect there are none. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Mr. Gensheimer, thank you again. Appreciate your attendance. We have a motion moved by CO, seconded by Camara Sulak to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We move on to new business. The first item is 21-246, Community Events for 2022. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 22nd, 2021 memo from City Clerk Royal and to approve or not to approve the community events for 2022.
Move to acknowledge?
Let me start with CO first. Were you just to acknowledge, or did you want to approve or not to approve, Mr. CO?
I was going to acknowledge and approve.
Okay, we'll do a motion then to acknowledge and to approve. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Seconded by Camara Sulak. So again, it was moved by CO, seconded by Camara Sulak. Clerk Roy, when you have the microphone, the floor is yours.
We have received the 2022 events. We did not get anything yet from the chamber, but there has been a change in the leadership there, so I'm still waiting for their Christmas parade, tree lighting, and any other events that they're having. But the ones you have before you are estimated. I also gave you what we had up until now for this last year. We obviously did not have everything this year that we have had in the past, but I think everything that was held was well received and well attended. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Are there any questions for the city clerk? Councilmember Dillon.
So, thank you. Clerk Royal, just for clarification, so you have received their event forms already?
For everything except for the chamber.
Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, are the estimates that you're using based on what is in the form or on past years, or?
Both.
Okay.
We send them out to the police department, the fire department, and the DPW to get estimates on how much it's going to cost for porta-johns, for labor, all that good stuff, and then they send me back the information based on what last year's was and what the difference is from last year's event to this year's event. Sometimes they go from a one-day event to a two-day event, and they put all that into the estimate.
Okay. I guess I'm just trying to figure out, do we know, is there a breakout between labor and other expenses?
We do not charge for anything besides overtime, because they're going to, DPW, police, and fire are here during the day anyway, so we do not include labor unless it's overtime.
Okay, do we account for labor, like anywhere? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I'd like to figure out what our in-kind is for all of our events, so that we kind of find a balance as to how much staff time is being used for events, in addition to just overtime. I guess at some point, I'd like to sort of see that. And then also, any expense that we are buying, the porta-johns, if there's snow fencing or any kind of other equipment that we're utilizing for an event.
We do keep a list of, the DPW and the police all have a regular time and a overtime. I just do not include it in my report. because
Okay.
It's not included in what the city reimburses or what our in-kind service is. So I haven't done it in the past, but I'm glad to send you that information.
Well, it's not my call to ask for that. It's just something that I would like to see the city look at when we're in the budgeting process. So I would like that at some point to become a part of a process, if that's the desire of this body. And the only other question that I had, I can't tell from my notes what it was, so I will yield my time. Thank you.
There are additional questions? Mayor Pro Tem Gearbow, and then I'll jump to Councilmember Kamir Sulak.
Actually, I think for clarification, and I thought about this last year too, because we use the museum properties, or I'm representing right now just the Historical Society, we will be submitting the proper form to you in the future. We haven't done that in the past, and I thought of that last year. So because it does state the community event, I think we just assume because it's the museum and we have a lease with the city and all of that, it didn't necessarily clarify for this. But I believe going forward, we need to do that. So I will submit that information for you.
Thank you. It helps also for me to have the dates because we put them on the calendar.
Definitely, and considering one or two of them have gotten to be a little bit larger, we may need to provide, we have one outside facility, but we may need to do another porta-john at some point, so we may need the city's assistance. So, thank you.
If I may add too, to Mayor Gearbaugh's point, that is a great precedent to set for any other liaisons to committees. If you are organizing a larger event, it would be extremely beneficial for you to still go through that community event process so that we have those dates and that information for our DPW and police.
Very good.
And city clerk.
Mr. Kamir Sulak.
Yes, thank you. While it may go without saying that community events are very important, I will say that they, in the last year, what we did and in the past, they've always been very well received. It's something that many people look forward to. And looking over this, it looks like it's consistent with the years past, allowing for the last couple of years that there was much less. So I appreciate the level of detail in providing how it's broken out. I know we could always use more detail, but I appreciate what you provided, and it makes sense to me. So, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any additional questions or discussion on the motion? Then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Kamir Sulak to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 21-247. This is school zone designation. This will be a motion of the to acknowledge the December 14th, 2021 memo from Police Chief Hart and to approve or not to approve TCO number 2428 to establish school zone on Woodland and to reduce the speed limit from 30 to 25 on school days from 7:50 a.m. to 8:50 a.m. and 3:45 p.m. to 4:45 p.m.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kraus. Chief Hart, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So this is part of a larger, much broader discussion about safety along Woodland, crossing guards, increased signalization and line markings. I walked about 15 miles around our community last week after work and noticed that we do lack a lot of our proper striping in the roadways for our crosswalks and intersection lines. So that's something that I will be working with Director Searles on, kind of firming up a plan for next year together as we identify them. We've had a lot of discussions regarding school crossing guards. I think this is a very straightforward request from the superintendent. I think that's the easy part, reducing the speed limit for, 5 miles an hour for an hour in the morning and in the afternoon. What I think a lot of people are interested in is what else are we going to do to enhance safety and security there? So we've been working with Tesha, Ryan Marion, and others to do some increased signage there at the crosswalks. So tonight is just the beginning of the process, I guess, is what I'm sharing with all of you. It's pretty straightforward, reduction in the speed limit. And I'll answer any questions you may have.
For the benefit of council, but also for the public, so we had a stakeholders meeting, I think 2 or 3 weeks back. The chief was unable to attend. He had a prior commitment. Deputy Chief Radzik sat in. I was there along with Colleen O'Toole. Councilmember Kraus was there. Vice President McVeigh and Superintendent Lotch represented Saline Area Schools. Mr. Teams was there along with a number of other concerned residents from Wildwood Subdivision. It was a very good, it was a frank and robust discussion. In addition to exploring a school designation zone and reduced speed limits, we also talked about increased signage, striping, and the city manager can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's money in this year's budget to do some crosswalk enhancements, including some lighting similar to what was recommended by School Board Member Estep.
Yes, that's correct. And actually, I can give a quick update on that. We do have $15,000 set aside in this year's budget, and Foreman Marion has priced out and received quotes. We'll actually be upgrading not only this crossing, but removing the in-road LEDs and changing to a push-button LED flashing sign at the nearby crossing. So both of those crossings are similar on Woodland Drive. And that has been quoted, and that is being ordered to be replaced.
Very good. Excellent. Well, appreciate that update, and again, we appreciate everyone's work on this, in particular the folks in Wildwood for their support and advocacy. I will be supporting this motion. I have no questions at this time. Are there questions for the chief or city manager? Looks like just about everybody has a question. So let's start with Councilmember Kraus, and we'll work our way around the dais.
Thank you. Just a quick question, Chief. I appreciate the extra monitoring. As time allows, obviously police work, you can get diverted onto something else. Is the intent to kind of keep that going right now? I know it's break, but when break comes back, I don't want the momentum to be lost.
Yeah, so we will have a visible presence along Woodland. As you know, we get a lot of requests to be in different areas of the city at the same time. Rush hour, whether it's in, the south end of the city or along Woodland. So we do our very best to be out there.
Okay. I just want to say to Mr. Teams and the group at Wildwood, it was kind of neat being my first year elected official, seeing a regular person in the neighborhood come to council and the school board and the police department to express concerns and then have all of us work together to a solution. It doesn't always work quite this easily, I'm sure, but this was a good example of the public, we're here to serve you, and so you brought this to us and we put our heads together. Just wanted to say that was kind of neat to be involved, and thank you to Mr. Teams.
Thank you, Councilmember Kraus. Councilmember Kamir-Sulak.
Yes, thank you. You stole some of my thunder.
Sorry.
I will say that it is very nice to see all the stakeholders and their dedication to this. In addition to the increased police presence and looking at getting some more signage there, is there anything else that we can do in the meantime until we're able to, get these other, I will be fully supporting this.
Yeah, Councilmember Dillon had sent in a series of questions today, so we engaged a little bit on that, and part of our issue is we're down crossing guards. I don't know if you've ever driven by our crossing guards, when they're out at their post. the most friendly people you'll ever meet. They're always waving at folks. They're very happy to be there, but they're from their neighborhood. So for me to try to pull a crossing guard from, let's say, around Pleasant Ridge and put them up at Woodland, they would not want to participate in that. They want to be in their neighborhood. They generally have children. We have crossing points that are split between John Heller, who's one of our part-time dispatchers, takes the morning session over at Woodland. Someone else may pick up the afternoon. So we're down significantly in our crossing guards. So I know a lot of you have put out, the job postings for the city specifically to our crossing guards, but we would really love to hire at least 2 more crossing guards so we can put in the area. Now, quite honestly, I know, Wildwood and Woodland would be the preferred area for a lot of parents. We do provide a crossing guard for Woodland. It's a little bit further to the east. I look at North Ann Arbor and Woodland probably as our next crossing point to prioritize them. So if we can get 2 applicants and get them trained up, we'd love to have them out there. So just kind of spreading the word and encouraging someone that you may know that's working from home or has a child that goes to any of the elementary schools. We'd love to get them up and running.
All right, I'm glad to hear that. Did you say that you are having some dispatch or some of your staff there at that crossing, as much as you have that availability?
Yeah, so we do, when John works midnights, let's say, if he's in covering a midnight shift and we want him fresh for that crossing point and he needs to go home and sleep, we will actually use a police officer to cover that crossing point.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but keep in mind that generally takes us patrol down 50%, right? So those are infrequent, but if we can't find a substitute to pick up that crossing point, then we will cover that with a police officer because that is the only crossing point for residents and students and parents to get from the north side of Woodland to the school side.
Right.
On the south.
Well, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're taking all the opportunities that you have with your staff to be there. And that's all that I have. Thank you.
Very good. I didn't see your hand up, Mr. Seal, but if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, feel free.
Just a comment, I've even seen the chief of staff of the police department staffing a school crossing point. It shows, I guess, how much he regards the importance of these duties for the department itself. So, thank you, Chief, for your efforts.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dillon, any questions or comments?
Thank you. As the chief mentioned, we did have an email exchange earlier I had some questions and he provided some responses and had a very good dialogue. And just to let everyone know what sort of my questions were about, which is, do we have other school zones? And the chief had indicated at the current time we don't, because Pleasant Ridge is actually in a residential neighborhood which already has a reduced speed. But he is looking at both North Ann Arbor and Maple, as there are schools on those streets too. So it may be coming down. And this isn't out, and please correct me if I'm wrong because I'm kind of going by our notes. This isn't out of the ordinary that Pittsfield, our Saline schools that reside in Pittsfield do have school zones. So it's not like we're creating in our own island there. My only concern with this is that I don't want to present a false sense of security to people by reducing a speed limit and children feeling they can still cross the street at unsupervised crosswalks. If there is a crossing guard at the mid-block, then that is where kids should be crossing the street. If, to say that, oh, this reduce is going to make it safer, it really, I don't want to provide that, and I don't want to state that. So I want to make sure that we don't feel as though we're eliminating a problem. And that was really my biggest concern.
Yeah, I think parents obviously are going to have those conversations with their children, right? We reinforce the safety message with our partners in the schools for Safety Town. We send police officers there every summer to go to Safety Town. So it's important for our parents to have those discussions with their students walking to school. When I was coming up to North Ann Arbor and Woodland last week walking, there was a very young lady on a very small bicycle, probably the smallest bicycle. Maybe I'm getting older and don't remember them from when my kids were younger, but she rolled right up and hit the crosswalk to cross North Ann Arbor, going westbound on Woodland. And I was ready to hustle up there and kind of help her cross the street. She knew exactly what to do, the light turn, the crossing walk. She did a couple of takes, and then crossed the street. We almost have to get into a defensive walking mode now. Like we all were taught defensive driving, and it's anticipating what someone else is doing. So please don't assume that because we're going to lower the speed limit, for an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, that everyone's going to follow it. Try to make that eye contact with the drivers. We'll be out there providing enforcement, but it's very important to have those safety discussions with your children.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Potem Gearba, anything for the chief?
Just maybe a little clarification. I know you said the history was that required this because it's been this way for 10 years or plus, was the reduction of busing by the schools?
Yeah, I think we're the victim of quite a few things this year, if you want to look at it in that manner, is we kind of had a lot of forces come together, I guess is a better way to put it. We had an expanded walking zone, right? We've had a lot of our crossing guards, 4 of them, who determined during COVID, I like being at home. They don't want to come back into the workplace, so they retired from the program. And we had really great weather, up until recently. So we had a lot of folks that were out and walking to school. So I would love to fill our open crossing guards just as much as the schools would love to fill all their open bus driver positions. So we're just in a very strange spot where everything kind of came together. And I think this is probably one of the more simplest, safest things that the city council can do right now immediately as we work to get that signage up.
Yeah, I actually have no problem with you creating this type of zone, reducing the speed limits, because I think that is the best way. But we aren't anticipating putting a crosswalk from, I don't know what, I can't remember the street that goes into Woodland subdivision right there.
There's Sycamore Run and is it Cottonwood?
Yes.
Are you thinking of the Cottonwood one where it's closer to the?
No, the one farther down. Do we have an issue at that intersection, just next to the Methodist church, basically, when you come in?
Wildwood?
Wildwood.
Yeah.
Wildwood Trail.
Wildwood
Yeah,
Trail.
we had traditionally put one there, yes. We do not have one now, we just have it over by Sycamore Run.
And that's where the new enhanced crossing would go.
So will we be putting in a handicap ramp and everything too to connect to the sidewalk?
Ooh, I want to say when I walked that, it was all curb cut already, but
Yeah.
I'd have to go take another look at it.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure it is, Dean.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify when you're doing that, because if it's not going to be that type of a crosswalk, then we've got other issues that we need to bring about.
2016, was it? I'm trying to remember Jeff's notes, but there were some updates that were done, I believe, for ADA back then, yeah.
That's it for me, thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Del Orco, any questions or comments?
I just wanted to ask the city manager for clarification on the enhanced crossing piece, the $15,000 that have been allocated for this. Is this the type of enhanced crosswalk where the pedestrian has the ability to stop the traffic with the button and the lights start flashing?
Yeah, so it's a push button. It'll operate on both sides. If you push the button, both signs will start flashing.
Okay, and then the ordinance will reflect that it's a law that you have to stop?
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
That's the existing law, is that you have to stop for a pedestrian and crosswalk.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Mr. Gearbo, one more thing, and then I'll grab you, Chief.
Yeah, glad we're addressing this, and I think it's a concern of that neighborhood. But I believe we have other intersections that are a similar problem like this, and are we going to be addressing this, especially on South Ann Arbor Street and potentially, potentially it's going to be
There's one on Maple as well.
Maple when that's coming
Yep.
up. So do we have those anticipated, and perhaps those should be part of our fund balance that needs to be identified for next year? So if we can make a note of that, I'd like to make sure that those are addressed at the same time. It always is a concern when the squeaky wheel gets the most, and we need to make sure we're looking out for the other areas.
Yeah.
I know you do, but I just want to make sure we assign funding for that.
Yeah, as I started walking around and realizing that we do have some issues as far as striping and that, so.
Yeah, we know the striping, I think that we brought that up
Yeah.
before, but if there's an issue where we need to provide another one of these type of crosswalks with the advanced signaling, we need to be putting that in our budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's nothing further for the chief, Chief Hart, thank you.
Thank you.
And I hear no additional discussion on the motion. We do have a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded by Kraus, to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. We move now to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is commission, committee, and task force reports from council members. Again, I'll start to my right and end on my left. Councilmember Kraus, any task force, committee, or commission reports?
Well, in our consent agenda tonight, you might have noticed that we had about, I can't remember how many members, 6 new ones. We had 13 applications. Mayor Marl and I met and went over the applications together and gave the recommendations. I was very excited to see some, people from the public really wanting to get involved. And so that was kind of nice. So we have our 12/27 meeting coming up. Will be a large new crew. We also have 2 high school students, Jennifer and Nancy Gage, who are going to help us extrapolate some data and do some help on the healthcare task force. So really excited about that. We also, there's an offer. We've talked about the offer for IHA. We're still talking to them on the Lot 20. That is not done yet. We're still talking about that, but that's exciting that at least we're in talks.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Commander Sulak, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yes, I do, thank you. So I'll start off with the Saline Youth Council. We put together holiday cards with a little goodie bag as a thank you for the Meals on Wheels program, the people that do that for the Saline Senior Center, and drop those off to show appreciation for that. That's really important for a lot of our seniors, and I'm glad to see a couple of the Saline Youth Council members also getting involved in the Healthcare Improvement Task Force. The Arts and Culture Committee, we're getting closer to being able to assemble these, the little free libraries, but a little free art galleries. And that should be something pretty neat, but I'll provide more information soon. And they're also having a creative community contest, which is flash fiction. And I won't go into the details, but go to the Facebook page for the Arts and Culture Committee for more information on that. Then the DEI Committee is selling over the holidays and beyond, of course, the community cookbook, as well as some bags and some other DEI materials. So, and they are for sale here at City Hall. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Seal, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Nothing at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilmember Dillon, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Just quickly, the Parks Commission met last week. We met a bit earlier in lieu of holiday schedules, and we are working through our planning for next year. And we welcome any input from the community, as well as we are still soliciting for another member of the Parks Commission. So if you have an interest in our park system, we would welcome you on the Parks Commission.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbo, any committee, commission, or task force reports?
Just regards of planning, we're discussing the new revisions to the sign ordinance, and it's going to be interesting because a number of what we all thought in the past of what could be addressed in terms of ordinance enforcement and so forth are significantly being reduced by rulings and such that have happened in the courts. So it will be interesting when it comes forward to council to consider it. A number of the things will have changed and significantly been impacted. So we'll see that probably in the next month or two.
Very good. Mr. Delorico, any commission, committee, or task force reports?
Yeah, the Environmental Committee did meet last week. We spent a fair bit of time devoted to addressing the concerns in the community, as well as the members that most recently toured the MRF facility, and the issue of glass not being recycled by the MRF. We, as residents, put it into our curbside containers with the understanding that we're doing our good stewardship of the environment by recycling our glass, and we've since learned that that glass is being crushed up and used as a top layer in the landfill. We're brainstorming for ways to engage the WERMA consortium again to get an update on where we are in moving this in the right direction. Thought we might invite the representative that we were working with there, Theo Agamon, to come and give us an update on where WERMA is and establishing opportunities to work with a different type of MRF where we can actually accomplish the goal of getting glass recycled. In the meantime, there's going to be some considerable discussion on messaging to the public about what's actually happening to the glass.
Very good. Thank you. I don't have any commissioner and committee reports, but I do want to note for the record, we have a number of vacancies on a variety of boards, including Parks, Arts and Culture, ZBA, Environmental, to name just a few. This organization thrives on competent, quality people volunteering and serving on our various boards and commissions. So for those of you who are watching, or for those of you who will be reading about tonight's meeting, who are in the public, who have a little bit of spare time and want to get involved, please obtain an application. They're online, submit it to the city clerk's office. And in the event that we can't accommodate you this year, we keep those applications on file for a year to 2 years. And so you never know. Oftentimes vacancies are created at various times throughout the calendar year. I mean, we try our best to fit people in where they feel like they can best serve. So again, if you're interested in giving back to the city of Saline, having some fun and contributing something tangible, I hope you'll consider a board or commission or even a task force in the future. Let's transition now to reports or other announcements. Councilmember Crouch, do you have any?
No, not this time.
Okay, Mr. Kamara Sulak.
Not at this time.
Mr. CO.
Yes, Your Honor, I do, too. Just because this is the last meeting of City Council between now and the first of the year, I just wanted to remind everybody that on Sunday, January the 9th, we're going to have 2 meetings right here in City Council chambers. At 1:30 will be the Saline Brecken Friendship Group, and then following immediately thereafter at 3 p.m., the Saline Lindenberg Friendship Group. Both groups will be meeting right here in City Hall. So if you have any interest at all in the community of becoming an active part of either one of those wonderful groups, I would invite you to attend. I know there are a number of people that are involved and that I think benefit greatly from those relationships. And we welcome new members too for the coming year. So anybody who has an interest in either of those, the Saline Brecken Friendship Group or the Saline Lindenberg Friendship Group, Sunday, January the 9th, beginning at 1:30 for the first and then at 3 p.m. for the second, right here in council chambers.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Councilmember Dillon, any reports or announcements?
No, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh.
I just want to thank the community for their turnout for the Historical Farms Christmas at Rentschler Farm. We had probably about 200 people, despite the wind on Saturday, which kind of limited it. Many children showed and got to see Santa and Mrs. Claus, and we really appreciated it, and a lot of new faces, so forth. So again, hopefully everyone has a happy holidays and Merry Christmas from the Saline Area Historical Society.
Very good. Mr. DeLurco, any reports or announcements?
None at this time.
Okay, very good. Then we transition to water meters and water quality. Mr. Searles, Director Searles, any update on water meters and any new information on water quality?
Good evening. I'll start with the water meters. I did reach out as requested to the rep for Neptune. My last correspondence was Tuesday last week, asking where they were at with the quote. His last reply was Wednesday, said he would have it to me the next day. I did not receive a quote yet for Neptune price update. I did take some time, since I wasn't sure if I'd have it, to do some more research. You'd asked me to talk to other communities. I spoke to Ann Arbor about their meter change-out program. They said their biggest challenge to date was COVID and not getting access to the homes. I did ask specific questions about any issues with the valves. Their program outlined that they would try a first attempt at freezing the service line to not have to touch valves if they looked questionable. The second option was to turn it off outside at the control valve at the curb. We have those in our system as well. They did not have any issues as far as plumbing. When there was plumbers, they were available and they did reschedule. They outlined their program to include a comprehensive connection to their existing work order database. So they're moving along pretty good. I believe at their next meeting, they're going to put something in their ordinance to put a surcharge on the meters that have not been changed out. And have to be still read with the old system. I also spoke with personnel from Yucca. They did some meter testing. They took out some old technology meters and replaced them and monitored the results over 3 years. So on one 6-inch meter, they lost 30% in 19, 22% in 20. That's water that went through the meter that was not read. They did another 3 4-inch meters, same thing, 10%, 9.8%, 6.5%. That's what they found. Their newer technology meters are actually reading the meter that's going through, which helps them not have to raise the rate so high to their customers as they go through the changeout, so that all the water that goes through the meter is actually billed to the customer that's using it, and not everyone getting increased rates to cover that water loss. I'll continue to reach out to other communities and get you the information regarding meter changeout. I do know we do not currently have a work order system to help if we get if we do move forward with AMI conversion. I know right now hard cost for meter reading and meter rechecks is $38,000 a year that we're always going to spend until we move to AMI. There is some more. I do want to look at our meter replacement and what we're doing. I think Ann Arbor plans on a meter changeout program every 10 years so that they get all the water metered that goes through the system. Part of I'm sorry to jump around. Everything I need's in there. They did write in their program similar to what we were talking about in getting that service line verification taken care of as well as part of that program. So something that we would still continue to move on. I think that's all I have on meters right now.
Okay, and what about water quality real quick? Any update there?
We did get a decent spike in water quality complaints. I've been out to since last week, 6 site visits, met with a lot of residents. I think the work at the Henry Street Water Tower helped add some turbulence and issues in the system. We're working through, we've done 4, 5, 6 dead ends already been flushed and haven't heard anything out of those areas, which is encouraging. We've done 2 flushes related to they're not dead ends, but they're reactive to a couple complaints in those areas. So far, haven't heard any repeat complaints from those areas. So we're tackling it. I'm out in the public. We're looking at putting out some more information to our residents. We understand we have a problem, and we want everyone to know we're working on it, and we have some solid steps in place.
Very good. I understand that today you met with Sarah Massey, our PR generalist, about, is it a bi-monthly little newsletter that will go out, reference water quality?
Yes.
Okay.
And that may change as we go out and start getting our
Definitely, but the plan is right now bi-monthly, which I think would be great. And then I am actually going to record my weekly message tomorrow and do a little bit of messaging on the dead ends. And put that visual on the screen, which I think would be helpful, which shows not only the location of hydrants, but also where dead end lines exist. For council's benefit and for the public's, so we've resumed monthly flushing of dead end lines.
Yes.
How many are we getting through in a week?
Right now with the holiday, we didn't really get as many mayors as we wanted to. I would say we could probably get 10 to 12, depending on the workload, a week, and that should accomplish that flushing, that dead end map.
Okay, so about 10, 12 a week is going to be our standard moving forward?
Yes.
Subsequent to the holidays?
Yes,
Okay. And that's generally done during normal work hours, it's not done during the overnight hours?
correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you for updates on both of those items. Again, I'll start to my right and to my left. Councilmember Kraus, any questions on water meters or water quality?
Not at this time.
Okay, Mr. Kamara Sulak?
Yes, how many dead ends do we have total?
I knew you were going to ask that.
I
I
had
do
to.
have the map, and I do have them identified. I'll get you that information in the morning.
Okay. And any idea if some of them are, require more than others, more time, or more apt to,
I believe that's going to be the case. Working with some of our senior staff, there were some in the past that were really, really bad, and some that they really didn't hit. But without saying definitively, we're going to keep monitoring our work plus the feedback that we get from the residents and adjust how often we flush each area to make it right.
okay. Is there any other way than having people call or email and say that they have apple cider colored water, to be able to get that feedback? Is there anybody's,
Well, if I may, the best thing is to complete that Survey Monkey, because then we have their address and it takes them through a series of questions.
Right.
And that way we can track the data, which I think is what Larry and his staff are going to start to do. So certainly people can call, they can email, they can message you on social media, but the best thing for staff, especially in order to track this and respond expeditiously, is to fill out the Survey Monkey.
right,
That's our best tool right now because we do need the data.
okay. But any follow-up with people that had water issues and to see if it's been resolved, or is it just based on that we're not getting any, those same people are not complaining about their water?
And there are a few regular issues on Survey Monkey that I don't know if I can fix that particular issue.
Okay.
When we have a repeat complaint or the complaint escalates, I reach out to the resident personally, phone number, email, which again, with the Survey Monkey, we have that information, phone calls, and I go out and meet them if they want. I talk to them, tell them where we're at, what we're doing, and if they are on a dead end, or they're in an area that we had a main break, or they're affected by the tower. I'm giving them as much as I can, data-wise, information-wise, and let them know what we're doing.
Okay, awesome. I appreciate your attention to this. Obviously, it's very important. And I apologize if this was already, if you already mentioned this, but how long does it take to get all the dead ends flushed in the city?
It will take us the full month to.
The full month?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So, but it won't be like every day this is all we're doing. It's time available with
Right.
our appointments.
Of course. Your staff is doing a very good job, and we appreciate them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin, a quick count of the map that we provided previously, it looks like we have about 66 dead-end hydrants. That's me counting dots very quickly, but.
Sounds about right.
Thank you for dot counting.
Yellow dot.
Mr. Searles,
Colleen, just so you know, some of them actually have already been looped. We got to update our GIS, but yes, we'll call it
So
60.
conservatively,
around 50, give or
It's-
take a few.
Yeah.
To Mr. Kamara Sulak's comment, a question, are we also messaging when you talk to residents about this valve assessment program that is ongoing? And once we get a handle on whether some valves are partially closed or fully closed, that may also benefit long-term water quality in various regions throughout the city?
Absolutely. As I've had an audience with the residents, Mayor, I've explained to them all the corrective steps that that we're working on, that's coming in the future, that we're in contract with, so all of that.
Good, good. Mr. Seo, any questions or comments?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Councilmember Dillon?
No, not at this time, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
No, just from our discussions that we've had at Task Force, appreciate the information that you've been providing for us, and I think the meter change, as we have talked, is going to be a larger encompassing issue of really identifying everything within our city in terms of lead lines, issues, and concerns, if there are any of those. but also getting a good inventory of all that. So everybody's concerned about it. We're only looking for revenue. The reality is we're looking to solve all the concerns and issues that potentially could present themselves. And this would be an opportunity that I don't think would match anything we've ever done for the city in the past. So I'm glad you're proceeding with this. And then the only other concern was I do know that we want to encourage individuals that if you do file a complaint and Mr. Cyril reaches out to you, it really helps us if you do respond and meet with him, because that's the only way we can actually identify the problem. And I do know individuals have not done that, and they should take benefit of that opportunity. It's not something we've done in the past all the time, but to this degree, and you really are the individual. We've had staff go out, but whoever else is going out, I think, is going to help with that benefit. So I just encourage our public that if you've got a problem, have people come in and actually look at what's going on in your house. There may be something that you're not aware of, and our staff can help. So thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh. Mr. Delorco, any questions or comments reference water meters and water quality?
Not at this time.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Searles. And the last item I actually put on the agenda because I received a number of complaints and inquiries regarding deer population in the city of Saline. I have noticed a significant increase in deer in my neck of the woods, so that's Saline Heights, north of Michigan Ave, McKay, Mills, Russell, Hollywood, Highland, et cetera. And it is a nuisance, and I was just curious if other people have made similar observation or have received other complaints or inquiries, and if so, maybe it's time to start evaluating the issue. I know other municipalities have had to deal with this problem, specifically the city of Ann Arbor. I'm just curious as to the thoughts and perspective of other colleagues. Councilmember Kraus.
We have a little family on West Henry who visits often. There's a mom and 2 children, and they are so tame, they sit right there and look at you. So, yeah,
All right.
I mean.
Mr. Mayor Sulak?
Yeah, we have some deer that come across from the farm. They come across Old Creek, and they go into what used to be the woods there, and that seems to be fairly regular.
Okay, and would you, I guess, to both you and Councilmember Kraus, do you consider it a nuisance?
So that's a tricky question because they're in my backyard and they're cute and they don't bother anybody, but broader, yes, I mean, they can be.
Okay. Mr. Mayor Sulak?
Part of it is a safety issue with people
Sure.
driving.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Seal?
I see them quite often in my backyard and up in the cemetery, which abuts my backyard. I think they're a nuisance. They thought that the hydrangea bushes I was planting this spring were there for their nourishment.
They ate all mine.
Yeah. They ate all my hostas, they ate all my violets. I've tried any number of different kind of plantings, and they seem to enjoy them all.
Okay, fair
And I
enough.
don't find it pleasurable.
Okay. Ms. Dillon?
I live on the west side of Saline, near the river, and we have an abundance. We actually have herds of deer that come through. It is a nuisance, but it's a huge safety concern. A couple weeks ago, we had one that actually ran into our vehicle while we were driving. If the streetlights are out, it is just horrific trying to navigate the bends and the turns of our street, because most days, even during the day, you have to stop for deer crossing where they're going from the fields to the river. And it really is a problem that is going to need to be addressed at some point.
Okay, very good. Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh?
I think, like everyone else, we've all been experiencing deer. I don't necessarily see them at my house, but over on Bennett Street, I know there's a full set of deer, and actually Doug Elfring mentioned one deer was looking both ways before he crossed the street. So they're getting smarter, and they're looking for places to eat. And unfortunately, I do know that there have been some that have been feeding them, and so that becomes a concern that, part of our animal nuisance thing was that if that should occur, we should be reinforcing that aspect. But I think they've grown a taste to not only hostas and everything else, but rose bushes, anything that's green. And I know they're a nuisance. I'm just not there yet with culling them like Ann Arbor does.
Sure.
It would be more something of reinforcing the aspect of avoiding the issues of directly feeding them and so forth.
Sure. Yep. No, I get that. Mr. Delorco?
To the question of them being present, definitely. As Councilmember Kraus discussed, I live right next to her. We share a driveway, and there's a family of deer that live in our backyard and are quite comfortable there. I do think it's a traffic concern. I do think it causes safety issues for motorists. Just something to keep an eye on. I don't think it's reached the threshold of where Ann Arbor is. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh, but yes, we do, as we increase development and population density in the city of Saline, the deer have less places to inhabit, and they will be forced out of their natural habitat onto the roads.
Actually, Mayor, if I could, one thing I forgot.
Yeah.
A deer totaled my car in the city limits. I can't believe
That's right.
forgot to bring that up. I will note that my husband was driving, not me, but yes, at Maple and Woodland, and we were doing about 35 miles an hour, and the deer crashed right into the passenger side. His head came into the car by my head, and for a moment, we were really close friends.
Sweet.
But it totaled our car, but I'm with Mr. Gearbach. I'm not to the culling point.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, I'm not advocating for
Sure,
that.
yeah.
I'm just recognizing a problem, and I think we need to keep it on our radar. And so I guess my request at this juncture to the city manager is, this is not the most time-sensitive issue that we're dealing with, but perhaps it could be discussed at an upcoming department head meeting. There are a variety of solutions and options that would be afforded to us that other municipalities have utilized in the past. And perhaps in the next couple months, we could have a more focused conversation on this issue. I wanted to begin the discussion tonight because I'm of the opinion it's a nuisance. I think it was well articulated when others said it's a public safety issue, which it is. I wanted to see if that consensus was confirmed at the dais, and it was. It was unanimous. So, okay, very good. Thank you all. If there's nothing further to be brought under the discussion, I'm sorry.
I have one question for the city manager before we end the meeting, which is, what is the status of the sunset of electronic meetings?
That
It's
ends
set.
this calendar year.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
Has
set.
not
there
been
has
renewed.
not been an extension, so this will be our last Zoom meeting of the year.
No, only voting members of a board are not allowed to participate virtually. We can still allow virtual participation for any other non-voting members, and that same standard applies to any other commissions or public bodies. So we can still broadcast our meetings via Zoom or via YouTube, however we want, but you all could not participate remotely.
Right. Can't accept your votes if you're participating on a remote platform.
Right.
After January 1. We will afford guests, petitioners, the option of participating remotely. I think that is the best practice and promotes general health and well-being after the first of the year. Yes, Mr. Gearbaugh.
I apologize. I think just one update, if City Manager Canarad, just to state it. We did have some odor issues, concerns at the wastewater treatment plant. It related to the flare gas.
The digester unit and
The digester
yeah.
unit, but we also had an issue with the potential of when they burn off the
the flare.
methane. The flare device wasn't working. I'm not sure if that's been up and fixed, but that was one of the contributions to a worse smell last week. Just to let you know that they're working on that. It was just something that out of the ordinary came about, and unfortunately, you can't light it manually. It has to be done with electronically because it's a different type of gas and so forth. So unfortunately, that happened. And we want to acknowledge that at this point.
Mr. DeLurico?
I had one point of clarification for the city manager. Does the vaccine mandate status change with what's happened in the courts recently?
Yes, so I do expect a larger legal summary on this to come, but council should have on its radar that we will once again have to consider the vaccine mandate. It does look like the circuit court has upheld the mandate, at least for now, and the new deadline is January 10th, I believe. So we would be looking, if there's not another stay or additional legal action at that time, to adopt a policy, which is being reviewed again by our attorney.
Okay. All right, thank you.
If there's nothing further, we come to the second public comment period. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments from those in the audience this evening? The record will reflect there are none. Clerk Royal, did we receive any comments either before or during the meeting in which the individual wanted their statement read at this time? No, sir. Very good. Is there any other business to come before Saline City Council this evening? Well, whatever the hell you celebrate, we hope you have a wonderful holiday season. and a happy new year, and that your new year is, you're blessed with good health and happiness. So we'll see you on the other side. We'll see you in 2022. Please note our upcoming meetings, and at this time, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:09 PM.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Gearboss, seconded by Kamara Sulak. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned.